Having gone through the different types of bone cells now, or the different types of osseous tissue cells, we need to figure out how is the actual osseous tissue made? How do you make the bones? So we're looking at first of all the process of ossification. Now, ossification is the formation of bone. But this can occur in different ways and at different times throughout your life. First off, we'll look at the ossification of the actual skeleton in utero. So the formation of the skeleton in the embryo. That starts about 6 to 8 weeks after conception. We'll get to that in a second. But you also have ossification occurring throughout until puberty. That's the increasing of width and length of bones. It even occurs a little bit after puberty as well. And then thickness, remodeling, and repair bones can occur throughout life. So really, this ossification process, while it can take on different forms and different methods, can occur throughout life. Right from your initial bone development, right through the bones remodeling and repairing, all the way through the rest of your life. So, as I mentioned, about 6 to 8 weeks in is when the first ossification will begin. Now, this process is not going to be fast. It's not going to happen overnight or in a week or two. It's going to take months and months of processing. And even once these initial processes will continue and basically reach the termination, there's still then the elongation, the increasing in width, the remodeling that are occurring. So we'll start with the ones in the embryo in utero. We'll have to gain and grow into the ones that occur later in life. So the term intramembranous ossification. Now, intramembranous ossification is going to be how the actual formation of flat bones of the skull, as well as the clavicles, are formed. It's starting off creating the flat bones, so we're thinking about the structure of that. It's developing out of a fibrous membrane. So we're going to start from a fibrous membrane as the starting material, and then grow into the flat bones that will become the skull, and like the clavicle, for example. So to start things off, we'll start off with the basic actual membrane. So in this diagram here, you're seeing this all out here. That's all membrane. It's mesenchyme. So we have this initial membrane to start with. Then in that initial membrane, you're going to have osteoblast cells. So each one of these cells is going to be an osteoblast. Right where this initial clustering of osteoblast cells starts, it's referred to as the ossification center, or sometimes the primary ossification center, but the ossification center. It's where the process will begin in that membrane. Those osteoblast cells will then start to develop. They're going to start to secrete what's referred to as osteoid. Hopefully that rings a bell. We mentioned osteoid before is part of the organic components in the osseous tissue. Once the osteoblast cells start to secrete the osteoid, so all this little dots, all this little components that are around, that is the secreted osteoid. That osteoid is going to attract the calcium, causing mineralization to occur. So it's starting to form the very beginnings of this bone. So we have the osteoblasts that kind of form a little cluster in the membrane, the mesenchymal membrane. They then secrete osteoid, which attracts calcium and causes the mineralization to occur at that location. But that's just the start. As the mineralization occurs, as you keep having more calcification of the calcium coming in, you're going to notice that the inside here, there are no more osteoblast cells. Instead now, because of all this calcium that was deposited, all that calcium now has created a solid structure, which means the osteoblast cells became trapped. They are now, each one of these is going to be an osteocyte cell. So osteocyte. That means those osteocyte cells are inside lacuna, and they're trapped inside of that matrix. they will help to detect stress and strain on that developing bone. So the osteoblast that got trapped became osteocyte. The osteoblast cells, though, still remain around the outside ring. This outside edge, as it's spreading out, has all the osteoblast cells around the outside. Those osteoblast cells will continue to secrete more osteoid. The more osteoid, the more calcium is brought in, the more mineralization occurs. So the ones that become trapped, those osteoblast cells that became trapped, become osteocyte. They're monitoring and maintaining, while the osteoblast cells remain on the outside. They remain on this outside edge as it grows. And as it keeps expanding, the osteoblast cells go further out and further out. They just keep moving outward, creating more cells. Remember those osteogenic stem cells. So creating more osteoblast cells. Some of the other ones become trapped, become osteocytes. But they just keep on growing and growing and growing. More calcium, more mineralization, and an increasing size of the matrix. Now remember, as you form that matrix, that's the hydroxyapatite. That's that crystalline structure. But as this keeps growing, because we're in flat bones, we're making spongy bone. So here you can notice we have the trabeculae of the spongy bone. All these branches are trabeculae. So it's creating this structure of spongy bone now. Inside that, you can see all the blood vessels are filling in the spaces. Those blood vessels are bringing more calcium to continue the growth. So we're forming all this as it expands outward along the membrane. The membrane is still present. You can see on this outside edge here and down here, that's the mesenchymal membrane. It's still there. It's just now on the outside edges of the actual developing spongy bone. So it's still now there. So as this keeps going, you still have those osteoblast cells. This layer of cells and this layer of cells. Those are all osteoblast cells. They can still then create more actual calcified matrix. So the cells, the tissues are growing and growing and growing. You're forming the periosteum, forming the endosteum, the inside and outside membranes that will be around this bone. But eventually, at the very end, once this bone has grown enough for its current state, that spongy bone needs to have compact bone on the outside coverings. So we have our spongy bone here in the middle. But now what's happening is you created a layer of compact bone there and a layer of compact bone here. This compact bone creates the outside edges, kind of like sandwiching the spongy bone in. Outside of the compact bone is going to be the periosteum. So now this periosteum, it formed from the mesenchyme, but it's out beyond the compact bone. All those blood vessels that were inside, they're starting to get crowded. There's a lot of things happening. As they get crowded in, they're forming the red bone marrow. So that means we pretty much have formed a bone at this point. It's almost like a sandwich. You're going to have the outside periosteum. Now remember, this periosteum has the fibrous periosteum out here. And then inside that is the osteogenic layer of the periosteum, where the cells are. You then can go up to the compact bone, then the spongy bone, and then compact bone again. Osteogenic layer of the periosteum, fibrous layer of the periosteum. So we have a lot of just layering going on here. From the very center being the actual spongy bone, to compact bone, osteogenic layer of periosteum, fibrous layer of periosteum. And that is the actual flat bone at this point. Now sure, it's not adult size. We're talking now in utero, in the actual developing fetus. Even once that baby's born, this flat bone's got to grow in size as that baby grows. But this is the initial ossification, the intramembranous ossification. And that intramembranous ossification, remember, starts in a membrane. So intramembranous ossification.